Watch it, Alan. I'm shooting.
Hello all out there on YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. Please say hello to Stella. She's a very good girl. I'm at her house for the week, and she has graciously allowed me to film a video here. Once again, I am not in my typical location, and I apologize for not being in my typical location. The usual disclaimer here, I apologize if the lighting is weird and if the audio is weird. This is just the best location in this particular house to film. Hopefully we will eventually get back in front of the collection, but I don't know when that will be. But anyway, tell Stella she's a good girl, and let's get on with the video. So last week I did a video counting down my top 10 favorite horror movies from 2025. We have made it to 2026, and around this time of year a lot of YouTubers do countdowns of their favorite movies from the previous year, so I wanted to play too, so of course I did that. But I wanted to do a second video. I've seen other YouTubers do this before, where they count down their favorite movies that they saw in the previous year. Not the movies that were released the previous year, but the various movies that they checked out during that year. They count down their top 10 of those. And I wanted to do that too, because I watched a lot of stuff last year and I came across some really good stuff, and I wanted to share it with all of you. So, like I said, these horror movies here are not movies that came out in 2025. You're not going to find any 2025 horror movies on this list. These are just my top 10 favorite horror movies that I discovered last year, that I watched for the first time last year. They are from various different years, you know, some newer movies, some older movies, but they're scattered across all decades. But yeah, so this is just something I wanted to do because I came across some very interesting movies last year that I wanted to share with all of you and recommend to all of you. I watched a lot of movies last year, both horror and non-horror, and I might have even been able to make this a top 20 list, but I decided to stick to top 10 just because, you know, 10's a good number, and I don't want to... I tend to ramble on and on in these kinds of videos, and I didn't want to make this video too long. Also, some of these movies, while the title of this video is Top 10 Favorite Horror Movies, some of these movies are, you could technically say they're not horror movies. They may seem more horror adjacent or more thrillers, but I do think they can be included in a list like this, because even if they aren't horror movies, I see them being accepted by the horror genre and by horror fans. So, while most of the movies on this list are definitely horror movies, you're going to see a few that are not horror movies. But anyway, we'll jump into it right now. No honorable mentions here, so without further delay. At the number 10 spot, we have a movie called Circle from 2015. This is a movie that I heard a few people talk about, and as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to check it out because the premise sounded very interesting. If you remember the movie Cube, it's been a long time since I've heard anybody talk about Cube. You remember Cube? If you're a fan of Cube, leave that in the comments down below. It's been a while since I've seen that movie. I'd like to check it out again. But anyway, if you remember the movie Cube, this is a very similar premise. Cube, circle, it's about shapes. Anyway, like the idea of Cube is a group of people finding themselves in this kind of facility, which is basically a giant death trap, having to figure out how to get out of this situation. Circle is very different, but the idea is kind of the same. You know, waking up in some kind of facility, not knowing why you're there or who you're with, and trying to get out of that situation alive. The movie just throws you right into things. It doesn't give you a moment to breathe, really. You have this group of 50 people who wake up in this dark room, and they're each standing on their own individual circle, and it's around in this big circle. And in the middle of all these people standing in the circle is this weird device. Now, if one of them steps off the circle they're standing on, they are killed by the device in the middle. and every 2 minutes, the device in the middle chooses someone at random to kill. And the people in this room, they find out that they eventually learn that they have to vote for who's going to be killed next. They have 2 minutes to pick who the next person is, who's going to be the next person who's going to die. And if they don't choose within 2 minutes, the machine just picks at random. And like I said, if they step off the circle, they are killed. If they don't pick somebody, then someone is randomly killed. And it is basically, you learn as the movie goes on, that they have to continue to vote until there's only one person left. Kind of similar to the Long Walk that came out last year, and I love The Long Walk. But instead of, a group of people having to walk down the road and exhaustion resulting in being the result of who lives and who dies, the people have to pick who lives and who dies, which is a very interesting situation. And I love how this movie has no real explanation for why these people are here, why they were chosen, what exactly this whole thing is, allowing you to theorize of what it could be. Is this an experiment by the government? Is it an experiment by aliens? You don't really know. We are given, like I said, we're just thrown right into the mix. As soon as the movie starts, people get killed because they don't know what's going on. The fact that people die if they step off their own circle, we learn that right away. We're not told that right away until the characters figure it out. The fact that they have to vote for who is the next person who's going to die, we don't figure that out until the characters figure it out. Nothing is really told to us. We're just thrown in this situation along with the characters, and the characters have to figure things out as it goes along, and as a result, we, the audience, have to figure things out how it goes along. And I love how that sets it up, because it creates such a suspenseful situation. It has that ticking clock element, which only adds to the suspense. Every 2 minutes, someone's going to die, whether you vote for someone or you don't vote for someone. It's going to be picked at. Someone's going to be picked at random. That survival instinct kicks in. It's like, oh, I got to vote for somebody, or I could be the next person to die. And of course, there's 50 people in this room. And what's really interesting is you don't really know who the main character is. I mean, yes, there are people we grow attached to as this group is whittled down and whittled down and whittled down, but it's hard to explain because, there are certain people who you get to know better than others, but there are times where you think, okay, I think this person's going to be the main character, and then they're killed off. And there's and we're getting to know more people throughout the story. Because the whole idea is only one person can live, or at least that's how it's set up. They're not specifically told that only one person can live, but that's just the rational conclusion that you come to, seeing how someone is getting killed off every 2 minutes. And because of that, the fact that it's every 2 minutes someone's going to die, it makes it hard to think rationally sometimes, because there's a ticking clock. The clock is ticking down, and as it gets closer to the time where someone is going to be chosen, other people are starting to panic because they don't want to be the one to die. So they start thinking irrationally, and they start panicking. But all in all, it's the characters who are choosing who's going to die first, and then it creates all these interesting moral questions. You have elderly people in this room, and there are some characters who say, hey, they're elderly, they don't have a lot of time left, so why don't we just vote for them? But then on the other hand, it's they're human beings, they have just as much right to live as everybody else. They start asking questions like, who committed crimes in this room? And it's oh, well, you're a criminal, so maybe you don't deserve to live. It's no, just because someone's a criminal doesn't mean they don't deserve to live. And of course, okay, why did they commit the act that they did? He's oh, well, you're a burglar. Okay, maybe they were taking money to feed their family because they don't have anything. There's all these interesting moral questions. And it also, of course, it asks who has the right to live, who has the right to die. And the best part is it's around 90 minutes, maybe a little under, so it's a fast sit. And there's never any downtime because of that ticking clock element, because every 2 minutes someone's going to die. There's never really time to relax. There's a false sense of time to relax. There's a false sense of a breather. He's like, okay, someone's dead, we have time. But it's only 2 minutes. And the next thing you know, someone else gets killed. So it gives a false sense of a breather. So there are moments where you feel like you can catch your breath, but then it's time for someone else to be killed again, and then the tension instantly shoots up again. Circle is a fascinating movie. I don't know how many rewatches it's worth. It could be a once and done, but I think this would be a great movie for a group of people to see. Like, I can see myself watching it again, but I don't know how many repeat viewings this kind of movie has. That's why I put it at number 10. There are movies that I watch that I think are better than Circle, but I found Circle so fascinating and so suspenseful that I think it is a very good movie that is worth checking out at least once. While there are movies that I think are better, I do think that this was very interesting. That's why I wanted to put it at the number 10 spot. So for a movie night, I highly recommend checking out Circle from 2015. At number 9, we have Eating Miss Campbell from 2022. Eating Miss Campbell is a trauma movie. I don't think I have to say any more than that. If you're not a fan of trauma movies, you're not going to like this movie. If you're a fan of trauma movies, there's a good chance you will like this movie. This is a horror comedy that is not afraid to have some very dark humor, very controversial humor. It's not afraid to have offensive humor and bad taste humor. So if that's not for you, don't watch Eating Miss Campbell. But if you like trauma movies and you're okay with that kind of stuff, I highly recommend checking out Eating Miss Campbell. So this movie was directed by Liam Reagan, and it's kind of a sequel to another movie called My Bloody Banjo, which I'm going to be honest, I was not the biggest fan of My Bloody Banjo, so when I was going, I wanted to check this one out, but I was nervous, and I found myself loving it. As someone who loves trauma movies, this one hit me it kicked me right in my trauma fan heart. So the Toxic Avenger remake got its wide release in 2025. It had its theatrical run in 2023 and was finally released. It finally had its wide release in 2025. I saw the Toxic Avenger remake on the big screen and I absolutely loved it. The Toxic Avenger remake had somewhat of a feel of a trauma film. It was a trauma film, but not the most trauma-y of a trauma film, if that makes any sense. But I had a good time with it because it did have some of the essence of a trauma film, and I got to watch it on the big screen. But while the Toxic Avenger remake has the essence of a trauma film, and it is somewhat a trauma film, Eating Miss Campbell is a trauma film. Through and through, Eating Miss Campbell is a trauma movie. So, we have our main character, who is a goth girl, who is very aware that she is in a trauma horror movie. Like, she knows that she's in a trauma film, and she doesn't want to be in a trauma film, and she wants to get out of this trauma film. By ways, you gotta be delicate with what you say here on YouTube, but let's just say she wants to take herself out so she's no longer in this trauma movie and she can be in a different kind of movie. That's a weird part of the plot. It's kind of part of the plot, but also not. It's kind of part of the plot. It's really weird. It's really hard to explain. But she knows she's in a trauma movie as she's going through this film. And she has a psychotic English teacher named Miss Campbell, and she falls in love with her English teacher. And she develops a love for human flesh. And that's only part of this wacky, insane, bad taste plot. Now, when I say that this movie is filled with bad taste humor, I mean it is filled with bad taste humor. Like, this is a trauma movie, and if you know the kind of humor that trauma movies get into, this has that. And I always say there's a difference between good bad taste and bad bad taste, and I think this is an example of good bad taste. Bad bad taste is, when people are just being assholes. They're like punching down at something just for the sake of punching down at it. They're saying offensive things just for the sake of getting a rise out of people, and then when people call them out, they say, hey, it's just a joke, bro. That's why I think there's a difference between bad taste humor and edgelords. Edgelords are never funny, and the reason they become edgelords is because they're not funny. But there is an artistry to bad taste, and there's an artistry to bad taste offensive humor. And I do think Eating Miss Campbell is a good example of bad taste. It's good bad taste. But it goes into some directions and talks about some very taboo subject matter. So you got to keep that in mind when going into it, because it does dive into some very sensitive subject matter. So that's why I said at the beginning I kind of understand if people do not like this kind of movie. I mean, you have to be the right kind of person for this movie, and you have to be in the right frame of mind for a movie like this. You have to have the right sense of humor for a movie like this. But I get a kick out of the dark humor. I just love the fact that this is fully embracing the fact that it's a trauma film, and it's also kind of making fun of the fact that it's a trauma film, with the main character not wanting to be in this movie. Like, it's hilarious, because at first she's just like, oh, I'm in this B-grade horror movie and I don't want to be in this B-grade horror movie. And later on in the film, she looks at the camera and says the line, I hate trauma movies. Even though this is a trauma movie. That's one of the things I love about trauma films, is they are very aware of what they are, and they're not afraid to make fun of themselves. They're not afraid to, poke fun at themselves. Which is why I think they get away with making fun of people a lot, because they're always willing to make fun of themselves first, and they're always willing to say their own flaws before they go after anybody else's flaws. That's one of the reasons why I think it works. It is very bloody. It gets quite raunchy at times. It is an absolutely insane comedy, but you gotta be in the right frame of mind for it. You have to know what you're getting into before you watch this. So, Eating Miss Campbell, I had a good time with it, but I do highly suggest doing a little research before going into it. See if it's the kind of movie that you are okay with. See if the humor in it is the kind of humor that you will enjoy. If you are okay with this kind of humor, then go into Eating Miss Campbell and have a good time with it. For number 8, we have Girly from 1970. This is another weird one. It's a British horror movie from 1970. It has a quirkiness to it, but it is definitely a horror movie. You have this fatherless family. You have the mother, you have the maid, you have the son, and you have the daughter. And they're all kind of adults in this situation, or at least young adults when it comes to the kids. But they all kind of act like children. And they kidnap people and bring them into their family in the attempt to create the perfect family. And if you are not perfect, or if you try to escape, if the person tries to escape, or is naughty, or does not go along with this fantasy of the perfect family, they are killed. So we follow this one guy who is taken into this family. And we watch as he, is feeling around, trying to get how everything runs in this weird family. He starts kind of adapting to this weird family, and then as the movie goes along, he's trying to manipulate everybody so that he can get out of this situation. So this is not a particularly bloody movie, and even though the concept is disturbing, it's not a disturbing movie. It is fun. It's both fun, but kind of disturbing. It gets really weird in certain moments, but in a good way, because this family's trying to create the perfect family, and you have these kids that are almost adults, but they're still acting like children, which creates this weird dynamic. And it does create this both quirky and suspenseful situation, because we know they kill people who try to escape. They kill people who break the rules of the house. As they say it, they go to see the angels. There is a a perversion throughout this movie that is hinted at sometimes, but it's a little more in your face at certain points. But I wouldn't call this an overly graphic movie, and not a violent movie either. There are kills in this movie, but it's not a really gory movie. I mostly would say it's interesting and entertaining. You know, watching this guy trying to adjust to being forced to be a part of this family, watching this guy adjust to the rules of the house, and then watching him try to play mind games with all the members of the family as a way to eventually try and escape. I won't tell you if he escapes or not. You're going to have to watch the movie to figure that out. But of course, the person who steals the whole show is Girly. The youngest daughter in this movie is called Girly, and her brother is called Sunny. Sunny is fun too. I would say all the characters are interesting and entertaining, but Girly is the one who steals the whole show. I mean, after all, she is the title character. She is just such a fun character to watch because she has that entertaining craziness about her. She has that innocence of a child, but also this very sadistic nature, which mixes very well together. Sunny has that sadistic nature as well, but it comes out in Girly a little more, so yeah. This is an underrated gem. I've only heard a few people talk about it, and it is a very good, very entertaining movie, and I do think you should check it out. If you're a fan of 70s horror movies and you have not seen Girly, I say check it out. You might find a hidden gem that you will very much enjoy. At number 7, we have Heartland of Darkness, which was released in 2022, but was made back in 1989. So Heartland of Darkness was made back in 1989, but never got a release. Until it finally got its release in 2022, thanks to Visual Vengeance. I love the Visual Vengeance line. I have been diving into, shot-on-video movies and micro-budget movies and lower-budget independent films. And while Heartland of Darkness is not a shot-on-video movie, it was shot on 16mm. It did have a very small budget. I wouldn't call it a micro-budget movie, but it did have a very small budget. And the movie does a lot with what little it has. And I think it's a real shame that it did not get released after it was made back in 1989, because I do think that if this were released back then, it would be a cult classic now. It still has the potential to become a cult classic, of course, but I think it might have already been a cult classic by now if it got its release back in 1989. It has so many elements that we love in a cult movie, in a cult classic. You have these two people moving into a small town, and there seems to be something wrong with the population in this small town. You have this twisted reverend who runs this church that turns out to be a group of Satanists. You have Linnea Quigley. This is a movie that is very aware of what it is. It is a fun little low-budget B-movie. And I think it is very well done, especially with its small budget. It's a story you've heard before, but the filmmakers do a good job at telling that story. You have this guy who buys this new newspaper company in this town, and he starts learning about these deaths and disappearances, and he learns that there's some kind of conspiracy going on in this town. You learn about the church run by the Twisted Reverend, and then you find out that they are a group of Satanists. Yeah, it's not the most original plot, but the movie is still entertaining. The acting is a little rough around the edges, but everyone's putting in legitimate effort. This is definitely a real movie. It does have a very low budget, but I definitely say it is a real movie. And I found myself captivated by the story. I found myself kind of on the edge of my seat for a lot of it. There were moments that I found very suspenseful in this little movie. And it has some decent atmosphere throughout. But the guy who steals the whole show is the evil Reverend, Reverend Donovan, I believe is his name. He's a good character, he's a good villain. He does have a charismatic nature to him, which you want in a villain like this, especially since he's basically leading a cult of Satanists. You do have Linnea Quigley in this movie, but I would say she's not in most of the movie. I have not watched the making of this, so I don't have all this information, but you do get a sense that they didn't have her for very long, so they had to film all her scenes separately. But it's still good to see Linnea Quigley in an 80s movie. Always happy to see her. And you do care about the characters. They do a good job at developing them. And when they are in danger, it feels legitimately suspenseful. You want to see them get out of it. And they do a good job at making this very low-budget movie seem bigger than it is. They do a lot here that is very impressive given their budget. If you're a cult film fan and you like watching these, lesser-known B-movies, definitely check out Heartland of Darkness. While it's not a shot-on-video horror movie, it is kind of close to that vein, but even though it's 16 millimeter. But it does have a charm to it. It has that low-budget charm to it. I do recommend people check it out. It is a fun little B-movie that I think deserves to become a cult classic. Number 6 is Village of Doom from 1983. So this was inspired by a true story. And it's one of those movies that some people could say is not a horror movie, but I consider it a bit of a slow burn horror movie. It comes across as this kind of a drama at first, and then in the third act, it becomes a horror movie. I mean, it was horrific to me. And this is a very, very excellent movie. It's an excellent descent into madness movie. So this is a Japanese movie. The film takes place in this small Japanese village, and our main character is this disturbed young man who wants to go off and fight during World War II. But unfortunately, he is diagnosed with tuberculosis, and because of that, he is unable to go to war. Now, his fellow villagers look down on him because of this, even though it's not his fault. He got sick. But he's looked down upon by his fellow villagers, and throughout the film, he's just kind of shat on again and again and again, until it eventually gets to the third act, where he gets a shotgun and goes on a killing spree. And this movie is great. It's a very sad movie, it's because this guy is definitely a mentally disturbed young man, and he wants to go to war and he wants to get that glory, but it's taken from him because he has tuberculosis. And it's weird because so many people seem to be blaming him for not going to war even though he has tuberculosis. It's a very sad state of affairs. So he's just pushed and pushed and pushed until he eventually snaps and he goes on this killing spree. I would definitely call this a slow burn, but I always say a slow burn does not equal boring. A slow burn can be very interesting, when it's done right. Yes, there are boring slow burns out there, but there are also a lot of really great slow burns out there, and Village of Doom is one of them. It does such a great job at building the tension because we know this guy is going to snap, and we know what he's going to do. And then when it eventually gets to the third act, where he goes on his spree, it is very violent, and it is very disturbing, and it's very hard-hitting, because this is one of those movies that doesn't have flashy violence. It just has raw violence, which makes it feel all the more real. And it's just, he when he goes on this killing spree, he just starts going from house to house, blowing people away with his shotgun, and it is handled in a very realistic way, which makes it all the more disturbing. I haven't looked too much into the actual incident. I am curious, but do keep in mind this is basically a true crime movie. It is inspired by an actual event that happened in this village back during the time of World War II. It is a very tragic but very good movie. There's not much else I can really say about it. I do recommend checking it out yourself. Village of Doom, very good slow burn, very good descent into madness movie, very good true crime movie. Village of Doom is great. I cannot recommend it enough. Go check it out. Cracking into the top 5, we have The Mad Bomber from 1973. This is one where I fully admit that I am kind of cheating here, because this is more of a crime thriller than a horror movie, but I do think it gets a pass. I think it's, I think every horror fan will love this one and have a good time with this one. It is one of those movies that even though it's not a horror movie, I can see it being accepted by horror fans and kind of accepted into the horror genre. This is a sleazy, gritty exploitation film, and I absolutely loved it. So we have this guy played by Chuck Connors of The Rifleman and Branded fame. I love Chuck Connors. Horror fans will remember him from Tourist Trap. Well, anyway, he plays a guy who goes around to all these buildings planting bombs. And then you have this detective who's trying to hunt this guy down. Now, as that's going on, you have this serial rapist going around attacking women, played by Neville Brand, who played Judd in Eaten Alive. So, yeah, you have this guy going around attacking women, and the cops are trying to find him as well, but then you also have this bomber going around. And before they find out who the pervert is, they learn that he is a witness who saw the bomber. So not only did they have to find this mad bomber, they also have to find this very bad man, but they have to find him because he was a witness to the bomber, and he is pretty much the only way they can find the bomber. And because of that, they, have to deal with certain legal avenues because they need this guy to help them find the bomber because he is killing so many people with his bombs. So it's this really weird dynamic that they play around with very well in this movie. The whole situation is a mess, and not the plot of the movie, but the situation is a mess because you have to find this one criminal in order to help you capture another criminal. And it's just, no one gets off clean here. Everything is kind of dirty here because of the situation. But this movie gets so over the top at certain points. It gets very sleazy at certain points. It's definitely gritty. This is definitely an exploitation film through and through, and it's a great exploitation film. If you're a fan of Grindhouse movies, you will definitely have a good time with the Mad Bomber. Chuck Connors is the best character in this movie. Yes, he plays the bomber, but he does a great job at playing the bomber. I mean, he's Chuck Connors. Chuck Connors is just so charismatic that no matter what movie he's in, no matter what role he plays, he does a good job in that role, and he tends to steal the whole show in it. But Neville Brand as the pervert is also doing a good job in this movie. But we want to see him get his as well. Like, we want to see both these guys get brought to justice. But again, the situation is very messy because one's a witness of the other. But don't... this is a mild spoiler, but I'm going to say it. Don't worry, Neville Brand's character gets his in a very satisfying way. I'm not going to say how. This is a light spoiler, but I just want to add that caveat because I think it'll make more people willing to see the movie, given the subject matter. And it all builds up to a very suspenseful climax, and a very good climax. This is just such a good crime thriller. It's such a good Grindhouse movie. Definitely check it out, especially if you love good, gritty Grindhouse movies. If you're a Grindhouse fan, you will have a good time with The Mad Bomber. At number 4, we have Ozone from 1993. Now, Ozone is a shot-on-video horror movie that came out in 1993, not to be confused with Ozone: Attack of the Redneck Mutants from 1986, I think. I might be wrong on that, but anyway. They're both shot-on-video horror movies, but they're both very different. I have not watched Ozone: Attack of the Redneck Mutants yet. I tried watching it once. I fell asleep, so I'm going to try that again another time. But anyway, Ozone from 1993 is a great shot-on-video horror movie. I've been diving into shot-on-video horror movies in the past 3 years because I love to support micro-budget movies. I, as someone who defends micro-budget movies and lower-budget movies and stuff like that, I always admit that there's a lot of crap out there when it comes to those kind of movies, but there's also a lot of crap when it comes to big-budget studio movies, so for me, that's not a valid argument for me. But anyway, I love to support micro-budget movies because even with the crap out there, there are some of them that are great movies that are doing everything they can with very small budgets, and for me, that is to be admired. I think these are real movies, and if they had bigger budgets, I believe everybody would be giving them a chance and saying that they are great movies, but that's just what I think. I think the only thing holding them back from being loved by even more people is the fact that they are made with no money. And Ozone had a budget of, I think it was $3,500. And it's a very good movie, especially with such a small budget. It's got a crime thriller mixed with some body horror, mixed with kind of elements of Evil Dead, kind of elements of a zombie movie. You know how Evil Dead is both kind of a zombie movie and a possession movie? That's what we have with Ozone. But the interesting thing about Ozone is the possession or the zombification is done with a drug called ozone. We're following this detective whose partner has disappeared. They were in the middle of a drug bust and one thing happened. One thing led to another. But anyway, so the cop is trying to find his partner, and he's learning about this drug called ozone. And ozone seems to either possess people or turn them into zombies. It's a very, very original plot. And he goes into this weird underbelly of this, group that deals with ozone. You have some fantastic gore scenes here. You have some fantastic set pieces here. And again, all done with $3,500. That is not a lot of money. And with that money, even though it was clearly shot with a VHS camera, it's still a very good movie, creating this whole underground around this weird drug. Our main character is played by James Black. He plays Detective Eddie Boone. He's a good main character. You can't help but root for the guy, because he's going into this world that he doesn't understand, that at first he thinks is just a drug ring, but then it appears that there's this weird supernatural element to this drug ring. And of course he uncovers more and more as the film goes on. And there are some great sequences in this. There's a scene at the beginning, before his partner disappears, where his partner has blockaded himself in this room and there's zombies after him. And there's a great sequence where the zombies are punching through the door. And again, this was done with a very small budget. So to have, kind of work done like that, where zombies are punching through a door, is very good. But it's really the story that drags you in, because it's such an original concept. Either zombification or possession done with a drug. So there's some kind of cult around this drug. And that's fascinating, and it's such an original idea. That's one of the things I've been enjoying about diving into these shot-on-video horror movies, is because some of them, while diving into genres that I've seen before, are some of the most original ideas in that genre. Again, either possession or zombification done with a drug, like Evil Dead-style possession done with a drug. I know not everybody is into micro-budget movies, and I know not everybody is into shot-on-video horror movies, but there are some that I really think you should give a chance. Ozone would be at the top of my list of shot-on-video horror movies for newcomers to check out, just because it's so well done, and it's very impressive what they were able to do with such a small budget. And again, such an original idea. If you've been looking for some originality in the horror genre, I highly recommend checking out Ozone. It is very, very good. So yes, if you have not seen a shot-on-video horror movie, and you're curious to check out some shot-on-video horror movies, I think Ozone is a good one to start with. Keep in mind, it is a micro-budget movie, so there are things that are a little rough around the edges. But for a micro-budget movie, the acting is very good, the effects work is very good, and the story is very interesting. Yes, Ozone. Great movie for people just getting into shot-on-video horror movies. We're getting into a very rough one for number 3, so just mentally prepare yourself for that. This next movie, just want to get this out of the way before we get into it. It was a hard watch, but a very good watch. This movie really disturbed me and really hit me in the gut. At number 3, we have Black-Eyed Susan from 2024. So Black-Eyed Susan was directed by Scooter McCrae, the same guy who directed Shattered Dead, which is my favorite shot-on-video horror movie of the ones that I have seen so far in these past few years of diving into shot-on-video horror movies. Anyway, and Shattered Dead is a very dark movie, a very depressing movie. It's a movie that takes the ugliness of humanity and shoves it right in your face. Scooter McCrae also did this movie called 16 Tongues, which is interesting, but it's not my favorite movie by him. It has been a very long time since he's made a movie. And he came out with Black-Eyed Susan, which came out in 2024. And this is not a shot-on-video horror movie. He actually got a decent budget for this movie, but it is definitely a very low-budget movie. And it is a very dark movie that deals with some very dark subject matter and explores some very unpleasant ideas that, unfortunately, I think we might not be too far off from. So Black-Eyed Susan follows this man named Derek, who's down on his luck. He's talking with his buddy who's on the ground floor of this new prototype that was being tested out by a friend of his. Now, his friend has died, and now his other buddy, the entrepreneur, wants to get him on the ground floor of this project. And again, Derek is down on his luck, so he needs to do stuff for money. And basically, what's going on here is you have this company that is in the process of inventing this sex doll. And the first one they made, the prototype, is named Black-Eyed Susan. And here's where things get really dark. So basically, Black-Eyed Susan is a sex doll with artificial intelligence, a sex robot basically, that is made for abusive men. She's basically, and other robots like her that will eventually be made in the future, she's made to be an outlet for men with violent tendencies. You know, men who want to have sex, who want to do awful things to women. That is basically what she has been invented for. And Derek, while apprehensive, agrees to be a part of this study, you know, testing out the product so that they can improve and eventually make more of these robots. He's not comfortable with it at first, but he does go through with things at certain times. But then as the movie goes on, Susan seems to be somewhat evolving and you know, acting differently than she's originally programmed. And Derek starts showing her actual love at certain points rather than the abuse that she was made to endure. And the movie explores these very dark ideas that are unfortunately a part of our society. And that's one of the things that I love about Scooter McCrae as a director. Like I said, he's not afraid to take the ugliness of people, throw it in your face, and force you to look at it. This movie, I would put it almost in the same category as something like Clockwork Orange. Now, they are not of the same quality, and they are not, they're not of the same caliber. I would never say that Black-Eyed Susan is anywhere near as good as Clockwork Orange. But they both deal with these weird moral questions. Because, you know, in Clockwork Orange, you have the character of Alex, who is the most despicable person on the face of the planet, who eventually gets arrested and put through this, this program that is basically programming him to be less violent. And so basically it takes away his choice. So at first he's this very violent person, and then they do this thing to him that makes it so he can no longer fight back. That wanting to be violent makes him physically sick. But because of that, he can't defend himself when people try to hurt him. He can't even get sexually aroused without feeling sick. It basically takes away his choice and basically makes him into basically a robot that's just there to be a good person. But then he starts being a punching bag for, he starts being an outlet for other people's violence. So it asks that very interesting question of, you know, like, is it right to do this to somebody? Is it right to take away somebody's free will even if they're a bad person? Is it better to be a bad person with free will or a good person with no free will just forced to be a cog in a bigger machine? Black-Eyed Susan explores, like that, another uncomfortable idea. Creating robots that are outlets for bad people who like to abuse women. And it's a fucked up situation. It really is. And of course, it does explore the idea that, yes, while this could be an outlet for those people, it's not really fixing the problem. It's not addressing the problem. It's just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it that isn't really going to fix the problem. And that's kind of what this movie is saying and how it's exploring. It's a movie I cannot recommend to everybody because it's very dark and it does deal with some dark subject matters and forces you to ask some very uncomfortable questions. And the main thing I found so disturbing about this is, like with the way AI is now, I don't think we're far away from something like this, which is a very disturbing thought. Creating these robots with some form of artificial intelligence that are basically made to be abused for other people's pleasure. That's a very disturbing idea. It's such an uncomfortable watch, but deliberately uncomfortable. There were only 2 movies last year that gave me a physical reaction. Bring Her Back because of one particular scene in that movie involving a knife. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But that's just because it was such a gnarly scene and such a painful scene that it made me it made me react. Black-Eyed Susan made me physically shudder just because of the ideas it's exploring. But again, that's kind of what it's made to do. It's made to make you feel uncomfortable. Derek is an interesting character because you don't know if he's a good guy or not. He was in a relationship, but he's now out of that relationship, and the relationship ended because he got drunk and hit his wife. And there are moments where he talks to his wife, and he's always making the excuse, well, I was drunk. Well, I was drunk. And drunk or not, there's no real excuse for hitting your partner. I love the fact that we have a movie that is tackling this subject matter that no one else wants to talk about. I mean, because these are things like, let's face it, there are abusers in this world, and, and it's just like, they would probably kill for a product like this, and that, I'm not saying that's a good thing, and the movie is not saying that's a good thing. It's just acknowledging that, unfortunately. Yeah, Black-Eyed Susan, I mean, this was the movie that hit me. It's one of the movies that hit me the hardest this year and really made me think about things that are unpleasant to think about. It is similar to another movie called Companion. Slight spoiler for that if you haven't seen it, but Companion is about this, robot girlfriend that is brought to this cabin in the woods for a get-together with her boyfriend and a few other friends. And things go downhill from there. And it does talk about kind of the same subject matter and explores the same themes of sexism and, abuse and stuff like that. But Companion is a much more digestible film for everybody. That's a movie that I can recommend everybody check out. And it is a lot more fun to watch, even though it explores these ideas. It is definitely a more fun movie. But the way I describe it is like, Companion is kind of a slap in the face. Black-Eyed Susan is a kick in the balls. And it is a rough movie to watch. But yes, it is exploring ideas that I think need to be explored because, again, with AI and where things are going, there's questions that need to be asked and need to be addressed, and I don't think we're asking them. But anyway, we'll move on. Black-Eyed Susan, I cannot recommend it to everybody. But if you do some research and you think it's a movie that you can handle, I do recommend checking it out. Even though it's a very dark, very uncomfortable film, it is a movie that I think is worth watching if you understand what you're getting into. I cannot say that enough. Black-Eyed Susan is a good movie, but know what you're getting into before you decide to watch it. At number 2, we have The Flesh and the Fiends from 1960. We have a movie starring Peter Cushing and Donald Pleasence. That's enough to win me over right there. Peter Cushing is one of my favorite actors of all time. Him and Vincent Price are, I would say, my top 2 favorite actors. And Donald Pleasence is always great. This is a fantastic movie from the 1960s. It's a telling of the story of Burke and Hare. Now, Burke and Hare were these 2 serial killers from back in the day who, back when, medical science was still, coming up, doctors and college professors and stuff like that would need fresh cadavers to help teach anatomy and stuff like that and look into certain things and learn more about the human body for medical research. So one thing that would happen is they would buy bodies from from their back door, and there would be grave robbers who would rob the graves and bring the bodies to them for them to use. Now, Burke and Hare were people who were originally digging up bodies for a doctor, but they found out that they could make more money by killing people and selling them to the doctor. And the doctor didn't question this, even though he kind of knew that that's what was going on. That's what we have here. It is a telling of the story of Burke and Hare. And this is just a great, great, underrated classic from 1960. It's black and white, and it just has that feeling of a classic horror movie. When you watch it, it just feels classic. And it's a lot grittier than other movies that came out in 1960. There's a sequence where you see some breasts, like some naked women's breasts. Now, I believe that was cut out of a version, but then it was put back in, when the movie was released on Blu-ray and stuff like that. But just like think about that, a movie from 1960 having female nudity in it. It's not like the most graphic thing in the world, and it's not like it's like throughout the entire film. It's just this one section of film where you see some breasts, which doesn't sound like a big deal nowadays, but back in 1960, that was a big deal. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock did the shower scene in 1960 for Psycho, and we don't see anything there. That's not knocking a movie for any reason or another, and I'm not saying you need nudity in a film for it to be a good movie, but just the fact that it's like an interesting thing, with censorship being the way it was back then, having female breasts in a movie, kind of a big deal. But that's not the only reason to watch this film. It's just such an interesting story. And it is very creepy, and Donald Pleasence does a great job, and of course Peter Cushing does a great job. And of course you can't forget about George Rose, who plays Burke. George Rose plays Burke, Donald Pleasence plays Hare. And of course they both do a great job playing off each other. Hare is kind of like the dominant one in the group, and Burke is, like the more submissive one in the group. And you can tell that, he's kind of taken advantage of by Hare, but they're still kind of in this together. Donald Pleasence does such a great job on this. I would say this is one of his best performances. Up there with, he's mostly known for Dr. Loomis in Halloween. I would put that up there with Dr. Loomis from Halloween. Him as Hare, such a good performance. And while it's not an incredibly bloody movie, given the fact that it came out in 1960, it still has that gritty nature to it. So it's got the classic feeling of a black and white horror movie, but also grittiness of 60s Grindhouse cinema, eventually going into 70s Grindhouse cinema. Everyone gives a great performance. Peter Cushing is great, as always. I mean, he always gives 110% regardless of what he's in. It's just so good. That's all I can say. It's just so good. It is such an underrated gem. Classic horror movie that not enough people talk about. I've seen a few Burke and Hare movies, and I can definitely say this is my favorite one of the Burke and Hare movies. Cannot recommend The Flesh and the Fiends enough. If you love 60s horror, and if you're a Peter Cushing fan, definitely check this one out. Even if you're not really into black and white horror, I do recommend giving this one a shot, because it is a little more grittier than other black and white horror. I mean, I love horror from every decade, regardless if it's black and white or in color. But anyway, The Flesh and the Fiends. I'd say this is the best Burke and Hare movie. I cannot recommend it enough. It is just such a great, great movie, and definitely a hidden gem of 1960. But in my number one spot is a movie that at least got its American release in 2024. And if I had seen this movie in 2024, I think it would have made my number one favorite horror movie of that year. But unfortunately, I didn't see it until 2025. And of course, the release schedule is kind of weird because it's a foreign film. But anyway, I had to talk about it here. At number one, we have Red Rooms. Red Rooms came out overseas in 2023, didn't really get its release in America until 2024. So a lot of people, at least here in America, considered it a 2024 horror release. And unfortunately, I did not get a chance to see it in 2024. I didn't get to see it until last year, 2025. But yes, I do think that if I had seen it then, it would have been my favorite horror movie of the year. It is such a good movie. It is a disturbing movie without being graphic. It is a suspenseful movie without a lot happening. It is a engrossing movie with such an interesting story. It's a serial killer movie that's not really about serial killers. It's more about the fascination with serial killers. Now, this is both a French horror movie and a Canadian horror movie because it was filmed in Quebec and the movie is spoken in French. I think you could call it like both a French horror movie and a Canadian horror movie because, again, they're speaking French. It was filmed in Quebec, all that. But, you know, I guess we could say it's more of a Canadian horror movie, even though everyone's speaking French in it. But anyway. And it's, like I said, it's about people's obsession with serial killers and people's obsession with true crime. Our main character is this woman named Kellyanne, who does modeling. She does online gambling, and that's how she makes most of her money. But she is also obsessed with this murder trial. And she meets this young woman named Clementine, who is also obsessed with this murder trial. So basically you have this guy who is being accused of murdering 3 girls. And it also explores the idea of red rooms, which is this sort of internet urban legend that I have no doubt actually exists, where people can find these videos on the dark web of someone torturing and murdering somebody. And apparently this guy has made these red rooms and killed 3 little girls, made the videos and posted them on the dark web. I say allegedly because even though it's pretty much clear that the guy did it, the trial is made to prove that he did it. But anyway. So Kellyanne is fascinated with this trial, and Clementine is part of this group of people who are insisting that the killer is innocent, even though there's a lot of evidence to prove that he is guilty. But they're diving into conspiracy theories. They're diving into all these other things, and it explores this idea of serial killer groupies, which is a very disturbing thing. So Clementine is diving into conspiracy theories, wanting to insist that this man is innocent. Kellyanne is just obsessed with this trial and with this killer. And we're also following, because a lot of it takes place in a courtroom, dealing with the trial. And like I said, it's one of the most disturbing movies I've seen in a while, but you don't see anything. Everything is suggested. And what's so fascinating about this is, it's a serial killer that's barely about the killer. The killer doesn't even have a line in this movie. We do see him during the trial, but I don't think he even speaks a line in it. It's all about people obsessing over him. And Kellyanne is such an interesting main character, because you can't really call her the protagonist of the film. In many ways, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but you could almost call her a villain in certain ways. But yeah, when I watched this, I was just fascinated the entire time I was watching it. And they do such a good job at suggested violence. There's a scene in this movie which is the most disturbing scene of the movie, but it doesn't involve blood, it doesn't involve any kind of violence, it involves what someone is wearing. I'm not going to say any more than that, but that sequence is the most holy shit moment of the film, and it's all around just an outfit. Red Rooms, great movie. I can't say anything else about it. I loved it. Definitely one of my favorite viewing experiences from 2025. And that's my list. My favorite discoveries from 2025 in terms of horror films. I'm definitely, of course, I'm obviously going to watch more movies next year. Let me know if you want me to do this again for 2026. You know, do a list of my favorite horror movies from 2026, and then do another list of random movies that I watched from 2026, because I wouldn't mind doing this again. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I have mentioned some movies that you might want to check out that you haven't heard of. If you have seen any of these movies, leave what you think of them down below. And let me know some of your favorite horror movie discoveries from 2025. Not movies that came out in 2025, just movies that you saw for the first time in 2025 that you think are worth checking out. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 list. We will be getting back to the regular reviews and my regular weirdness in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Tell Stella she's a good girl. And until next time, this is the Maniac, here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die.